You're listening to the AmWritingFantasy podcast. In today's publishing landscape, you can reach fans all over the world. Query letters are a thing of the past. You don't even need a literary agent. There is nothing standing in the way of making a living from writing. Join two best-selling authors who have self-published more than 20 books between them. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Autumn Burt and Jasper Schmidt.
Hello, I am Jasper.
And I'm Autumn.
This is episode 60 of the AmWritingFantasy podcast. So I think this one should be a very informative episode for the listeners who are new to writing. We are going to talk about different types of editing available to you and what you should expect to pay for it. I have a few notes on that. And for the more experienced writers, we will share our views on which type of editing you need when you are a bit further along in your writing career.
And it's so sad. I know a lot of authors are not excited about editing, but I absolutely love editing. So hopefully we can let that enthusiasm leak through and not have people go running away going, oh my God, editing, I hate editing. It's so exciting. I love editing.
Yeah, but that's good. I don't know quite how I feel about it, so it's good that one of us love it.
Okay, I can say wholeheartedly that it's one of my favorite parts of writing, because to really take something that might be rough, might not be rough, and to turn it into something whole and get it ready to be released is just, it's such an exciting time.
Yeah, so we're going to get into all of that, but hey, Autumn, I got to tell you, at our house, the boys and I have been home alone for about 6 days now, so it's not good.
Oh no, I didn't know your wife was away. That's so 3 bachelors in the house. What have you guys been doing?
It's no good. I mean, without my wife in the house, things just gets really unhealthy really fast.
Oh, that's horrible. So she's the linchpin that keeps everything together.
Yeah, I take it. So, the boys, they sort of, they do their begging eyes and stuff about unhealthy food and say, can we have this and that? And then it's like, yeah, okay. So we've been cooking unhealthy food and my youngest was at one of his classmates' birthdays parties yesterday. And then when we got back home, we turned on the PlayStation and we played FIFA for something like 5 hours together while we were eating candy and popcorn. So it's just like, this is no good.
This is a side of you I hadn't known existed. I was so shocked. But it sounds like a wonderful bonding experience, and it's an amazing segue into what's going to be our next episode, but I'm going to save that for the ending. So it's very fitting for the next topic.
Yeah, that's good. But I am happy to say that my wife returns from Finland this evening, so I am really looking forward to that.
That's fantastic. Well, I hope you've made her a welcome home banner and tidied the house, and everyone is filled on their junk food now. Yeah, well, the house has been tidied and cleaned, and I did all the laundry this morning as well. So that's pretty good. And no, I mean, the boys and I have been enjoying ourselves, but I must say I do prefer when she's around. It just and the funny thing is, I don't know if you feel this as well, but it's really weird. But when she's not in the house, it's not that she has to, lie in the bed next to me, but I just sleep better when she's in the house. I don't know why. It's so weird. But maybe it's just like 20 years living together that does that to you. I don't know. But it's just like when she's not in the house, I don't sleep as well. No, I totally agree. And especially, it's for me, like if I know Adam's away, I can like tell myself, I'm alone and I get myself to sleep. But if he's if he's sick or he's having a bad night and so he goes and sleeps in another room to not disturb me, it actually disturbs me worse because I wake up and I just feel that absence. And I'm like, where are you? Are you okay? What can I do? And it's just like, it's totally counterintuitive. He leaves so that I don't, he doesn't wake me up, and I'm like, no, you left, you woke me up.
Yeah, but it's weird, and usually, my wife works night shifts, so she's not sleeping at the same hours as me anyway. But it's just like the fact that I know she's in another room in the house, then I just sleep better. I don't know why.
Well, it's very, very sweet, which is good because you and I, we are both we both had very long-term commitments to our spouses, so I totally get that. And yeah, it's someone who's been in your life, like you said, 20 years. So of course you're going to be like so fine-tuned to like,
Yeah.
where are you? You're not here.
Yeah, it's weird. And and I now got confirmed that everything goes to shit when she's not around. So
especially for 6 days.
Yeah, it's way. I mean, 1 or 2 days maybe, but this is way too much popcorn.
Yeah,
It's just no good.
And I've noticed, I never thought it was true, but I know a few other people who have said that they see their spouse leaving and they're like, oh, I've got time. I'm going to finish this. I'm not going to be interrupted. I'm going to get all this stuff done. And for some reason, you feel a little bit less directed. I don't know. I end up really having a harder time focusing, even though I know I actually have more time to work on something. And so, again, right. Counterintuitive. I think, the other person's not here. I'm going to eat oatmeal and I'm going to get all this stuff done. I'm not going to make a big dinner. And I'm like, yeah, I'm lonely. I'm going to watch Netflix. It just doesn't work as well. Oh, darn it.
Yeah. Oh, what about you then? How have you been?
Good. Well, you know that we actually moved this week, so that was kind of the exciting thing. We left our very adorable apartment that thoroughly enjoyed, except for the noise and being right on the main street in Brattleboro, and we're moving I think it's only 3 or 4 miles south to a little cabin in the woods, but in between we came running up to Maine to pick up a few things. It's kind of sad when you're like, yeah, we just drove 300 miles just to go pick up some stuff, but that is America and the distance is here, and that's what we needed to do. So we'll be back down to the cabin in just a couple of days, and I cannot wait to get it settled. We have some work to do there because there's it's part of the agreement for us renting it is that we are actually fixing it up and adding to it a little bit, because we've done that before. We've lived in a yurt, we've built cabins, we've done all this craziness. So I'm looking forward to getting that done. So hopefully I see the end of February and like it'll be done and we'll be moved in the spring. Hopefully it'll snow once. We'll have the snow falling through the pines and the hemlocks, and there's a little stream out front.
Sounds nice.
I sit by the wood stove and it'll just be heaven. Until then, I foresee a lot of hard work, and I'm getting, I don't know if it's older, or my joints. Used to love woodworking, but now I do too much construction. And my hands flare up a little bit. So I'm not looking forward to that, but
no,
we'll get through.
Yeah, I kind of got enough of all of that some years back when we were moving out of our apartment, and we had to fix it up before we sold it and whatnot. I already back then I told my wife, I'm never going to do this again. I don't care if we have to wait like 2 more years before we buy or sell anything in the future. We have to save up to get some builders to do this stuff for us, because I'm not going to do it anymore. I hate it.
A week on the internet with the AmWritingFantasy podcast.
So I want to give people a reminder of what we mentioned on last week's episode, because this episode that you're listening to right now is airing on the 17th. And that special offer that we announced last week ends on the 23rd of February, 2020, that is. So basically, this is your last chance. So as a reminder, what we're offering is an ebook of the plotting guide that we are releasing later this year. And not to forget, we're going to draw one lucky winner at random who will win a free seat in our premium writing course, the Ultimate Fantasy Writer's Guide.
Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing who the winner is and checking all that out and seeing who joined us on Patreon. So the links are in the show notes. And yeah, come on over while you can, while we have this special offer. We don't do this often, so now's a great time to join.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very rare actually that we're doing this sort of thing. So keep in mind that the deadline is on the 23rd, and you just need to join us on Patreon, as Autumn said there, and I want to mention as well what I said last week, that the plotting guide is actually going to be for sale for $9.99, and you can get in for $1 here. So yeah, you do the math on that one.
It's kind of worth joining. I'd do it if I wasn't already like hosting it. So I don't need to, I guess. I've been working on the plotting book, and so I know what's in it. And it's a good book. It's going to be really great, and I think help a lot of authors, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you forwarded something to me that I had to share because
yeah.
it's wonderful to get comments. So everyone who ever comments, even on the podcast, whatever you do, even if you're reading, someone's book, comments and reviews are just so wonderful to get. But we had a comment on one of our earlier videos. This is before we switched to being podcast based. So this is something that's
very old.
I know, it's so old, which is really exciting that someone only just found this YouTube video and they got really exciting. And it was one that is plotting a series before you write. So this is something that came out summer of 2019, maybe late spring. And so
okay. It's
so
not that bad. It's like eight, 9 months ago.
But I wanted people to remember we do have these YouTube videos that are back there that are before the podcast. So if you're really enjoying these, go check them out. They're a little shorter. We put a lot of effort into making these, and people have commented on them. Things like this video had me floored. I'm used to watching several minutes of mindless chit-chat, followed by anywhere from 0 to 2 useful pieces of information, which I may or may not have already heard. Then here comes Miss Autumn telling me that all of this really helpful information I've never heard anywhere, nor figured out on my own. She's casually throwing it down so thick and fast that I had to keep replaying segments until I'm sure I have it all written down. You guys are amazing, with a couple of G's, which is awesome. I'm so sorry to see that your good faith attempt at creating a YouTube resource for writers didn't take off, which is why we're on the podcast now. You are both very accomplished and have so much value to share. I am so glad you are staying, even if it meant changing focus to the podcast format, and I would have been lost without this video, and look forward to watching, listening to many more of your offerings as I work on my author dream. So boom,
so kind.
How is that for making you feel like warm and fuzzy?
Yeah, that's so kind.
This is so kind, and a great reminder that we have some amazing videos that they're more visual based because that is the format we were working on. So they only stayed as videos. We never transformed them into a podcast. I guess we could always revisit them as a podcast.
Yeah.
But they're there, and there's a wonderful YouTube channel. So if you guys have, 20 minutes you want to spend and you've caught up on all of our 60 episodes now of podcasts, go and check out the YouTube channel.
Yeah, it actually, to be honest, it has happened more than once. That people have posted questions in the AmWritingFantasy Facebook group, and all I had to do was actually go to the YouTube channel and grab the link to a video and post that as a response to the question raised, because quite often there is a good chance that there will be a video on the channel that actually answers the question that you're having, because there is a lot of videos on there. There's like 3 years worth of videos or something. So
released once a week. I think you were over 100. Yeah,
it's over 100 videos. So there's a good chance you can find something, but of course you don't have to just keep. I don't mind at all that you keep posting the questions in the Facebook group,
and we'll find them for you.
Just know that sometimes I just reply with your video link, and that's it.
Fair enough.
And on to today's topic.
Okay, so editing.
Editing.
I mean, I guess can be a bit confusing about the confusion about this stuff, because there's different types of editing. But
yes,
and when you're first starting out, you'll hear different words being used or terms in terms of what editing is, but sometimes they're referring to the same thing, so it can be a bit confusing.
And I do remember when I was first naively working, like I'd done a book, and before I'd become published, those early manuscripts that you pretend like you never wrote and are buried somewhere on a hard disk that you don't want to lose, but you don't ever really want to find again either. And I thought editing was maybe just punctuation, or I really didn't understand that there were different types of editing, and that to do it logically, I had to figure out a sequence that worked for me. That is probably why I love editing now, because I figured out a sequence that I really think is efficient and shows great results and works. And I know that editing is not just you finish writing draft 1 and then send it to an editor. There's like this whole, I have 10 versions usually between the finished draft 1 and the send to the editor. There's a lot in there.
Right. Yeah, but I think there's like I don't know how you prefer to do this, but I was sort of thinking that we have, at least in my view here, we have like three different levels of editing. So we
Absolutely.
have developmental editing, we have copy editing, and we have proofreading. That's sort of the way I think about it.
Yep.
But I don't know if that aligns with your way of thinking about it.
I actually wrote down 5 versions. I don't know, each one's slightly different, but some of them sort of overlap. But yeah, so you listed 3, and I actually considered almost 5 steps to do with an edit before, which is probably why I end up with 10 drafts, because I probably do each of them twice, I guess. But I agree. You start with a developmental edit. I call it content edit, but I think we're getting at the same thing, which is looking at your overall story structure.
Yeah, developmental editing, structural editing, you can also call it that.
Mm-hmm. And so,
what was the word you just used there?
Content
editing. Yeah, yes. Exactly. And it's all the same thing.
It is all the same.
At least in my view, it is.
I agree. And what I think is interesting is right off the get-go, there is contention on when you do that developmental edit. For me,
is there?
There is. A lot of people say you have to let your manuscript sit for at least a month, 6 months, a year. And
why?
Yeah, that's what there's this huge. I've researched editing. This is like we found one of my weird hobbies, I guess, that I don't usually let into. People know how much I like editing, probably because I don't have time to edit other people's work. I barely have time.
Now you just told everybody on a podcast. That's not very good.
I know, but I love getting tips on editing because I do think it's fun. But yeah, so most people say, you need to let your manuscript, you need to finish it and let it sit so you can come back with a fresh pair of eyes. Okay. And while I don't disagree, to me, you finish your last page and you know now how your book ends, which is an incredibly important piece of information when you haven't looked at your beginning for a few months, 6 months, a year, depending on how fast you write. And to me, I like to whip out a sheet of paper, and I have a methodology I do when I do a content edit the first time, and I do the fastest read through in the world and take notes on point of view, characters, the major themes that happen, all of these notes that I then put down, and I even little ones that say, "Ooh, rough, needs work, needs refinement." I write down the subplots. I write all of this information down on my content edits so that after this first read through, and by knowing how it ends, I get to compare it to the beginning and see if it makes sense, or if I look at it going, it ain't the same book. Something happened in there and there's some weird kink that I've got to smooth out, or it's not going to work out. I think that's just an incredibly important thing to do. So I tell people, you don't have to wait on your content edit. Just go for it.
Yeah, that's interesting because, and I think that's actually a good thing that we're coming at it from slightly two different angles, because you edit as well. So in that sense, you are an editor, and therefore you're looking at what do I do when I do this type of editing, whereas I'm coming from the angle of I'm hiring an editor to do this stuff. So what am I going to get when I hire somebody to do developmental editing for me?
Exactly.
Which is interesting because it's the same thing, but it's two different perspectives on it.
It is. And again, some people, especially if you're new, you might not be able to figure this out until you've had someone, shepherd you through it a couple times, or maybe you have the time and the resources that you can say, I'm not learning how to do this, and you send it to a content editor you trust all the time, which more power to you if you do, but I love being hands-on and doing it myself.
Yeah, absolutely. But sometimes, I mean, especially when you're starting out, you need help from other people, other professionals who knows what they're doing. And at least at developmental editing stage, so this has nothing at all to do with grammar and word choice or anything like that. That's not what you're going to get here. If you're purchasing a developmental editing from an editor, they only focus on story level here. So this is like the big picture. Yes. So you should expect to get feedback on everything from how the story is structured, continuity issues, maybe problems with your pacing. They could give you advice on the characters, the point of view arcs, that you're using, and the arcs, and so on and so on. So
yes.
Basically, the point is just to ensure at this stage that your novel will become a let's call it good read, for lack of a better word, before you actually spend a lot of time on fixing grammar and all that other stuff. So that'll be totally time waste if the editor ends up telling you, chapter 4 to 6 is sort of derailing the entire thing. You need to rewrite those or do something differently or whatever, right? Then you will be glad you didn't spend a lot of time doing grammar stuff on chapter 4 to 6. That's just gonna waste a lot of your time.
Yes,
but I would also, yeah.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, I think I like to put it that you don't know if the words that you would be proofreading to fix the punctuation and the word choice or the spelling are even the words that are going to make it to the final novel. So
no.
This is why you don't start with that. This is a content edit to even just work out so I'm working on building a cabin. So this is making sure that the foundation, the structure, the roof is going to be supported. It all is laid out. The bones of it are truly solid. You need to figure that out before you worry about what color you're going to paint the interior.
Yeah. So we can talk about the cost towards the end here for each of the types of editing, but I guess the quite unfortunate part here is that this developmental editing, if you're looking at it from the angle of hiring an editor like I am, and not talking about doing it yourself, then the unfortunate part about this is that this is usually something that the beginning writer needs. Mm-hmm. And it is also the most time consuming and therefore also the most expensive type of editing. So it's a bit sad that that's the way it is. So when you're first starting out and you have no money for it, then that's where you have to buy the most expensive type of editing. But I don't know. But that's just what it is.
It is. And I mean, I know some people try to get by with beta readers or alpha readers or a really good author friend who's more of a mentor. So there are other avenues, but definitely almost every first-time writer, new writers really need to do a content edit, have someone help them through a content edit. It would be really unusual for you to write a first novel with all on your own and it's perfect and doesn't have any problems or structural plot problems or character arcs.
Really? You burst my bubble there.
Sorry. I'm just being truthful. But it's possible you might be that 1/1,000,000th percentile that can do it.
Right.
But I definitely think this one's worth getting done, but it is huge and time consuming, and you can work with someone for months, if not years, to make your novel perfect, or at least as perfect as it's going to get.
Be careful. Right?
Yeah, it's as best as it's going to get, and
don't spend years on your novel, please.
No, probably not, unless you're really young and you have a lot of learning to do and you're really a perfectionist. But hopefully it won't take that long. But this is definitely one of the most expensive edits you can hire someone to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we climb up the editing ladder, then my next entry is copy editing. I don't know what yours are. You have 5,
yeah,
so
I do. Well, after my read through, so I kind of consider it initial read through where you do all of this outlining and get all this stuff together, and then it's going back through and the chapters you like needs to be fixed or subplot lost, fixing all those problems. So that's still part of the content edit. I have like a read through and then content edit. So those are 2 parts of this whole. Right. So my next one is the grammar and punctuation. So yes, a copy edit. So I agree. This is after you got to the point where you feel like all the chapters, all the pacing's right, the characters are right, the words have, been smoothed out. Now you need to work on word choice as well as some grammar and punctuation. You're getting that smoothness that's starting to look like
polishing
polish.
Stuff.
Yeah. Starting to get that nice sheen to it.
Yeah. Some also call this stuff line editing. And again, in my book, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, some might argue otherwise. But I in my view, copy editing and line editing is the same thing. So the editor will review your manuscript and first draft, whatever you want to call it. But once you're done with the novel and you feel like this is the best that I can make it on my own, you probably have done several self-editing passes on it already. Then they will start fixing spelling, grammar, punctuation errors, and those sorts of things. And why I'm saying that copy editing and line editing isn't the same thing. If you want to separate these two, then I would say copy editing will only focus on grammar, while line editing becomes a more like deep dive into the meaning of each sentence and your word choices and stuff like that. But so those who argue that it's two different things, that's what they will tell you, that that's the difference between copy editing and line editing. But to me, the editor does this in one pass. So, and usually when we get editing done on our books as well, our editors will both fix grammar and punctuation errors, but they will also tell or make suggestions to us with comments about, hey, maybe you reuse this word or you reuse this word 3 times on this page, or would it make more sense you use this word instead because I think it clarifies better what you're meaning, and that sort of thing, right? So that's right. To me, you get that in one go, but some will argue differently, but yeah, so be it.
Yeah, and I think most good editors, at least the ones I use, will actually try to do 2 passes. So they'll do one, and they'll do a second one, and sometimes they'll do a computer-aided one, which is obviously an option, and then they try to do a read one, a personal one, so that they can get it. And a good editor will, if they see a sentence that does not make sense, they will flag it. They'll say, I'm not sure what you mean here, or this doesn't sound clear. A good editor will also say, are you sure you meant this character? Because I know I've done that. Sometimes you have a character in your head and you type the wrong name.
Yes.
Or your pronoun choice was incorrect. So that's always something that hopefully you have an editor.
Didn't you just say that his eyes was blue in the previous chapter and now they're brown?
Oh, if you have an editor who's that good, keep them forever. Send them candy, whatever it is they need to keep them happy. And I would say, this one, I have a 2 to 3 level on this one. So, I mean, I have to fix the problems from the content edit. And then I have going through each of the chapters so that the ones I say sounds rough, smoothing them out so that the words sound a little bit better. Then I go through and I do what I think is a good grammar, punctuation, like a good line edit. Everything should kind of fill up. And I often find myself going, oh, wait, did this happen? And, checking things. But then my final pass when I'm doing my line editing is I actually start at the end of the novel and work to the front. And I do that by paragraph, not by sentence, because I'm not that cruel to myself. But I do know some people who do it by sentence. And literally starting with the last page, looking at the last paragraph, I read it and I start going backwards, because this is a fantastic way of seeing your punctuation really clearer, seeing your word choice. And, oh yes, by the way, I'm also keeping a list of times when I see that I have favorite words I've used way too many times in the novel, or things I've consistently misspelled. I'm keeping a side list so that when I'm done, I could also do a search find and go and look for any of those other ones I've messed up. Like I said, I am anal with my editing. I admit it.
No, but that's what an editor need to be, right?
Yes.
I mean, you have to be very, very focused on the details and very perfectionist kind of way, because otherwise the edit is no good.
Yes. And and I still pay for an editor on top of doing all this on my own. So this is just my passes, and I always feel devastated at how many errors they still find in my own writing after I've done all these 10 drafts of passes. But it goes to show I've done 10 drafts of passes, and I'm anal to the core, and I'm running Grammarly, and I'm running search and find and replace, and I'm still missing things. It's amazing what you miss. You always need to have someone else look over your stuff.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? I mean, especially if we're talking fantasy novels, so you have 100,000 words, that's 400 pages, and you just get blind to it, because once you've been over it 10 times, you start to seeing what your mind wants you to see and not what it actually says on the page. And that's why shifting to another person helping you to take a look, that they'll catch the stuff. And when they do, you get it back with track changes, you are like, how could I miss that?
I know. And that's, to me, the beauty of reading it backwards, is you cannot get caught up in your own storytelling. You have to look at just those words. And some people, reading it out loud works well, changing the font or the font size works well. But for me, I just like reading it backwards. It works pretty seamlessly, and my husband and I are both sound sensitive, so even we don't watch many videos because we don't like noise, or we have it on mute. So I'm not going to sit there and read 105,000 words out loud, especially backwards. It would kill me.
It's gonna take 2 months, man.
I read much faster. But yeah, so that's the idea, is you don't want to be caught up in your own writing because, it happens. You start falling in love with the romance scene, or the climax is getting exciting, and you don't pay attention to your word choice again. So it's very important to find a way of breaking that. And I have to say, it's really helpful that when you send it to your editor and you correct the changes that they come back with, to then, if you have time and you're not really so anxious to publish it, letting it sit for 2 weeks and then reading through the whole thing one last time is also amazing. What you'll find that you want to tweak and what maybe they didn't see to recommend on word choice, and how many times you use the same word. So yeah, you can keep going on edits. At some point you just have to say it's done. It's what I try not to read. I try not to critically read something else I've written and have edited, because I know I'll start tweaking things again.
Yeah, absolutely. So the final stage on my ladder is then the proofreading.
Yep.
So this is the lightest form of editing and also the least expensive of them all. And this is exactly what it sounds like. So this is just the editor will go over the manuscript and fix any spelling, grammar, and punctuation errors. And then you might say, but wait a minute, wasn't this what you just explained as being the copy edit? And hey, thank you for paying attention. That's that was exactly what I was saying. But yes. where the difference is, though, is that with the copy edit, we also just talked about how the editor will give you suggestions on the words that you use or the meaning of the sentences, and give you some sort of feedback on that sort of thing, and where they might suggest you do some changes. Whereas the proofreader will typically not do that. They will just go through the manuscript. They will just fix errors, and that's it. So you're not going to get any copy edit type of feedback as well. So that's the difference between copy editing and proofreading.
Yes, it's a much lighter one. You might not get the noticing the pronoun choices or the questions of like, are you sure you meant this character here? Those more personal touches and kind of like, oh, you've been paying attention to what I've been writing are not there. It is literally like someone going, you misspelled this, you missed an in, should have a period or a semicolon here, and that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. So do you have more on your editing?
Nope, at that point, like I said, I've pretty much, after I've done mine, I've sent it to the editor, and when I get it back, I'll do the accept and reject changes, which sometimes I do reject changes. And if I can, I try to set it aside, and then I do probably something that comes up more as the light proofread, looking for any last changes and last mistakes that maybe the editor or I have missed. And sometimes, I have to say, if you have some good beta readers or some really trusted fans, it's after I've send it to the editor, maybe I'll send it to them, which will give me maybe another month before I see what they have to say, accept and reject their changes, and have my final run through as well. So yeah, you're probably at 10 to 15 versions in my camp at this point.
Yeah. But that's how it is, right? I mean,
it is.
And I think there is a good point in what you just said around approving and declining changes, because just because the editor says that they want you to change something doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it. You can reject changes and just say, no, what I wrote was what I meant, and that's what I wanted to say, and that's okay. But I would just say as well that you're paying a professional person to do this work, and they do this work all the time. So try to, if you're rejecting some changes, I would say be damn sure that this is really what you want to do. I mean, I would say you should probably accept 95% of the changes they want to do, because they're probably right.
Yes.
So it's only of the few ones where you're 100% certain, no, this is exactly what I want it to say, and then stick with it if that's the case. But don't be too much double, or questioning, I should rather say, questioning what the editor is sending back to you, because they know what they're doing, at least if you've got a good editor, right? So
yes, and
you
I
have to listen to them.
Yeah, and definitely. And if you've done a good job and selected the correct editor, you should have a good trust, and you should really at least look at what they've suggested. And if you don't understand or you disagree, should be able to open a dialogue and say, by the way, I don't agree with this, or could you explain this a little bit more? But I definitely know, like when I was starting out, maybe I had some editors that I thought had come recommended, and I know I had one that changed all my goddesses to God, singular, plural, capital. And that was a nightmare when I realized that. And I have to say that I never sent her a fantasy one again, because it just was like, wow, okay, so from now on, I'm going to check religions and let people know up front about the content, so that I do not have such weird things happening. And I've had another editor who gave me a fantastic few pages of an example edit. I loved it, went with him, and he ended up, the manuscript he gave me back, I can't remember how many changes. It was an outrageous number of changes. And he had gone through and changed all of my action tags and dialogue to dialogue tags. So it would be like growled, grumbled, said, instead of picking up a glass or something. And I was trying to fix it, and I finally just kind of broke down in tears, and my husband's like, just tell him you want your money back. There's no way you will ever feel confident that you didn't miss something that he changed. And I had to agree with him. I was devastated. So there are some issues with editors, and make sure you do like I said, I thought I did due diligence on that one. I still secretly think he subleased out his editing to a third party.
Yeah.
Because it was such a big change. So I don't want to get people scared, but editing is expensive. And there are definitely steps to find a good editor. And one of the best ones is to talk to author friends and say, who do you use? And do you like them? Who do you recommend?
Yeah, that actually reminds me of what we just said before as well, because if you go onto the AmWritingFantasy YouTube channel, there is actually a video there where I'm talking you through, like, how do you find an editor? And I'm basically, because in my in day job land, I have hired a lot of contractors over the years. And basically, it's sort of the same thing here. You are hiring a contractor, so you're buying a service, and the editor is selling you a service. So you need to approach this in the same way as you would if you're hiring a contractor to do something else, and you need to vet out who are the good ones and who are the bad ones. And obviously, you want to end up with the good one. So we'll put a link to that video in the show notes, so you can go straight from there and check it out if you're interested. But actually, it will talk you through the steps that you need to go through to find a good editor. And I can promise you, if you do what I say in that video, there is a very, very high likelihood. It's not a guarantee, but there's a very high likelihood that you will end up with a good editor. And editing is not like a protected title. Everybody can open a website and call themselves an editor and sell their services.
True. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the problem we are facing here. So they can charge you quite a lot of money to do something, and then what you're getting back, especially if you're new to writing, you won't be able to sort of see or tell that something is off. So you might take their word for gospel, and then they head you down a completely wrong path. Yes. So that's the danger. But check that video out there, the link in the show notes if you are interested in that.
Sounds good. Okay, so we were going to talk about pricing before we wrap up.
Yes, I think that's a good point.
Let's get to that. Just so people have an idea of expectations, because I think some of the problems are maybe going for a low-end one, not going in, wanting to save money, which I totally understand, and maybe getting someone who doesn't quite know what they're doing, and then you end up paying for something that you end up having to maybe pay again, or you lose sales, or you get bad reviews, and that's a really high cost of itself. So you should go into this knowing that there is a cost. You're paying for a professional, and you want to be paying a professional to do this, not your aunt's cousin's best friend.
No, absolutely not. No.
Unless they happen to be a really good professional editor, but...
No, but these are professional people, right? So of course you are paying for a professional piece of work. This is not where you want to skimp on money, right? I mean, and the same, we're going to say this again over and over again in the self-publishing success course for later this year. But when I'm talking about covers in that course, I keep saying the same thing. This is not where you're going to save your money.
No.
So I was trying to find some. I searched quite a lot on the internet earlier today to see if I could find some industry standard rates for reference points, but I wasn't quite able to. So what I can do here is, at least from my end, I can sort of give you what I believe should be around the rate that you should be paying for the different types of editing. But of course, this is based on my own sort of point of view and experience. So you can also correct me or challenge me, Autumn, if you think that I'm off on some of this. But at least this is how I see it.
Sure.
And at least it gives you people a bit of a pointer on what they can expect.
Absolutely, yeah.
Nothing else.
And I've definitely, like you said, I've done this in the past for other people. I've been an editor, so I can tell you if I think it's falling in the rates I remember as being about the going rate.
Right.
But yeah, it's been a couple years now.
Okay. So I have 3 stages here, like we talked about: developmental editing, copy editing, and proofreading. And I've tried to put some pricing together for each of those 3 stages.
Okay.
To see what you can expect, and we can just circle back afterwards a bit to the more experienced author and on what you need, because you might skip some of this stuff. But at least if we assume for now that you're going to go through all 3 stages of editing here, then you start with the developmental edit that we talked about before, and I would say you can probably expect to pay something like $6 per page. And normally you would say that there is 250 words on a page. So that if we calculate that means that if you have a 100,000 word fantasy novel, which is quite common, that gives you 400 pages to edit. So at $6 per page, that's $2,400 for the development edit.
Yeah, and I honestly think that is a pretty good average price, but also possibly on the low end. Really in-depth, someone who might work with you to really talk about the character development, character arcs, you could be paying for a fantasy novel up to $5,000 to $6,000.
Oh yeah, I mean, okay, yeah. So these are like some average figures? Rates that I think you can expect around. But you can go on all of these. I would say you can go a lot more expensive. I mean, the best editors out there, they have so many clients that they can charge a premium. But they're also extremely good at what they do. So you get what you pay for here.
Definitely. But I would say 24, to me, that's actually not even the middle. It's kind of a low-end average.
Okay, fair enough.
3 to 4 is probably average to me for something as long as a fantasy. And if you're talking series, let's just start with book 1.
Yeah. So as you can hear, this is the most expensive type of editing. And unfortunately, as we said before, this is what you need when you're first starting out. So that's a bit of a shame. But yeah, that's it. If we then move on, the
improvements you'll see are amazing. So
yeah,
it's worth
it makes
at least
a difference.
Once. Pull all your friends and family and have them for 1 year. This is your birthday present. Go for it.
Yeah. So next stage is then copy editing, and here I would say then we go down from the $6 per page to probably like $4 per page. And at 400 pages, that gives you $1,600 for a copy edit.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very fair, very honest average. It could be, I think, as low as $1,200, as high as $2,400, but that's a good average.
Yeah. And proofreading is after that, then it gets even cheaper. You can probably get that for $3 per page, so that's a total of $1,200 for a 100,000 word fantasy novel. But I would also say it depends on what you can find, because with our proofreaders, for example, that we use for our novels, we are paying like $300 for a proofread. So it certainly does not have to cost $1,200 at all. But I think if you just go like on random checks with Readsy, for example, if you go on Readsy, which is like a website that has a lot of editors that you can hire, I think you should expect probably like $1,200 for a proofread.
Right.
But it can be a lot cheaper than that as well. Yeah. But again, you need to be careful here, because especially with proofreading, some people charge a very minimal fee for it, but what you get is also pretty bad. So you need to be careful.
I agree. And yeah, I mean, I've seen very, very cheap, and sometimes they're amazing. I I have a few beta readers who refuse to get paid, and they're wonderful editors, and I love them to death. Find them, keep them, love them, always. Yeah. But yeah, then even still going through an editor, I mean, you can get away with 300, 600, 900, somewhere in there. It's definitely the lesser end, but it's also not someone who's going to really, they're going to fix some stuff, but they're not going to make it shine, that if you don't know how to make it shine on your own, you might still feel like you're missing something if you just do a proofread.
Yeah. Okay, so you can see that at least gives you something like to go through all the stages, then you're up to like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 maybe, something like that.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
No, well, but it's the cost of putting out a professional piece of work, which you have to do. But on the other hand, I would say don't get like disheartened by the cost of editing, because in the grand scheme of things, if you're looking at authorship as a business, this is your biggest expense. And compared to other types of businesses, I mean, together with the cover, of course, that'll be slightly expensive as well. But compared to other types of business, this is not a lot of money to run a company on. $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. If you tell much other industries that this is your cost base, they will happily take that. They might get 50 grand just to get started, right? But we can do it for $5,000. So it's not too bad, but I do respect and understand, of course, that for some people it is a lot of money, and then you just have to save for it. But what I don't want to give as advice is that have you ever heard the term saying minimal viable product? Have you heard that before?
I have heard that before in terms of marketing.
So basically the idea is that you do it as well as you can, and then you publish it. And then, of course, you're going to get complaints. And then you read the complaints, and then you start updating based on that. So, and then once you've sold enough and you have money for an editor, then you hire an editor and you make them do a proofread, for example. But honestly, this is just hurting your brand very badly. So I don't do that.
I don't
rather save and then publish later.
Unless you're like doing it under a pen name and you plan on killing off that author pen name so that you don't care about the repetition. I wouldn't recommend it as the best way of building an author career. Go into it. And like we mentioned, circling back around, as you get better, hope maybe you can get out drop the content edit, or maybe you can find a beta reader who's going to be your proofreader, and really all you're doing is that middle level about 1,600, or maybe you'll find someone who'll do it for 12. I mean, I've been with my current editor for like 5 or 6 books, and at that point we're pretty much like, hey, you gotta do this for me? Hey, yeah, I'll do it for that. Oh, hey, thanks, because I'm a repeat customer at this point. He's making money off of me because he knows I'll be back again and again and again. So I'm at a rate that I'm sure he's upped his rates for other people, but I'm still at the low rate from 5 years ago. Yay!
Yeah, well, but I think maybe to finish off, for the more experienced writer, it probably goes without saying. I mean, if we can use ourselves as example, right? Mm-hmm. We do not do developmental editing. We don't pay anybody from it for developmental editing, but of course we do ping pong back and forth between ourselves in terms of making sure that there is consistency in the manuscript and all the steps that of the story make sense, and the character arcs and all that. We do that between us. So
exactly.
And once you've written enough novels, you don't need the development edit anyway. You will know where the problems are, and you will know how probably even to fix them yourself.
Absolutely.
So that part you can skip once you get a bit further ahead. And then what we do, at least on our end, is that once Autumn have done all her editing, which of course we have that benefit that Autumn knows what she's doing there, so that's a bit of a benefit. But once she's done with all her editing, then we send it off to a copy edit. Mm-hmm. So the first editor that gets it will then do both the proofreading, but also give us feedback on words and sentences and all the stuff we talked about in this episode. Mm-hmm. And then we get it back from there. Then Autumn will accept and decline the changes. But then we actually send it to a second editor. But this is only a proofread then in the last stage. So that we make sure that we use 2 different editors on all our books, because as we talked about before, you get blind after. Even editors get blind on the words. So giving it to another editor at the last stage, and this last stage is not expensive. We probably pay like $300 for that last step, so it's not too bad.
No.
So by then, Autumn have been through the manuscript like 15 times, and we've had 2 editors going through it. And even then, I have to tell you that there's still errors in it. It's just impossible to avoid it.
I keep a side list if I hear back from someone who's like points it out, and I don't immediately change everything as soon as someone tells me about it. I keep a list, and I try to once or twice a year do an update and fix everything at once, because otherwise you're getting, you're fixing something twice one month and once the next month. It'll drive you crazy. But yeah. I usually go through these books enough that I have them memorized. People ask me like years later, "Oh, I can't believe you remember that scene." It's like, are you kidding? I can recite this in my sleep.
Yes, absolutely. And then we move on to the next book, and soon we've forgotten all about it. So that's how life works.
Maybe in the life of I don't know. I still remember it all.
Well, I think if I had to go back and redo like book 1 or something, I think I would have to read up on it. I remember most of it, but I don't remember the details.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. So Autumn, if I get some outro music going here, you will have about 10 seconds to tell the listener about next Monday's episode. So are you up for that?
I'm up. Let's race. All right, so next week on episode 61, I have a special guest, Alexa Bigwarf, organizer of the Women in Publishing Summit, and we're going to talk about some issues facing women writers.
If you like what you just heard, there's a few things you can do to support the AmWritingFantasy podcast. Please tell a fellow author about the show and visit us at Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. You can also join Autumn and Jasper on patreon.com/AmWritingFantasy. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get awesome rewards and keep the AmWritingFantasy podcast going. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.